The Don cleared his throat softly. This was the sensitive issue, and it had to be handled just so he could blow his chance to bring the man under his influence. The arrival of dinner brought him a few minutes' reprieve as a plate of veal cutlets with a side order of pasta was set for him. A large and succulent medium-rare T-bone with a baked potato and a side order of salad was served to Ben. The men dug in quietly, each in his own thought as they ate. Victor sat off to the side, sipping a large Coke as he contemplated the progression of the conversation between Nicoletti and Ben. The Don was the undisputed lord of the Northwest criminal underworld. He made the laws that men lived and died by. Why should he pussyfoot with the N-word was beyond Victor's understanding, and the N-word carried himself with the swagger of a chief, and maybe he was a chief over his small empire, but the families of La Costa Nostra were the elite in the rackets and had muscle to back their position. Victor watched as his boss pushed his plate away, now filled and ready to resume the talk. In answer to your question, the Don said casually as he lit up his customary cigar after dinner and trained his eye on Ben, I don't ask that you pay the standard tribute for operating in what's been our territory for 30 years, but I propose a 50-50 split of any and all business, you, Lil, in the Northwest. I believe my statement is fair, being that my family is prepared to aid and assist you in any way possible. Benjamin forked up the last sliver of beef, chewed thoughtfully for several seconds, swallowed, and said, You must be joking. I can assure you I'm dead serious. The Don frowned from across the table as he watched the big black use the napkin to wipe his mouth, sip from his glass, and light a cigar of his own before continuing the conversation. I see, Ben grinned. I pay you 50% of every dime I earn in the region? Is that what you're saying? You make it sound like robbery, Nicoletti said calmly. No, not robbery, because that would take a lot of muscle. Benjamin sat forward in his seat as he addressed the old mobster. A hell of a lot of muscle, in fact, and I'm not the one to allow myself to be robbed, he said, pausing to blow smoke rings into Victor's face, who now sat scowling. But I'll tell you what, Mr. Nicoletti, Ben said, stubbing his cigar out in Nicoletti's plate. You find yourself another mark, and I'm going to forget we had this conversation. And you, he pointed one large dark finger at Victor, you seem to be steamed by my presence. We have a fucking problem. Victor remained quiet, but clearly angered by the blatant show of disrespect to his boss. Well, Ben sighed before getting to his feet. Thanks for the meal. He winked, turned, and headed for the door. Don Nicoletti sat too stunned to feel any immediate anger as he watched the tall, gracefully moving man exit the restaurant out into the night. That black son of a bitch had virtually spat in his face. The cocksucker had openly challenged his authority, his muscle. The Don fumed now. Get the check, the Don spat, getting to his feet and heading towards the door. Victor slid $100 bill onto the table and quietly stepped past his boss out into the warm breeze of the night, his Smith & Wesson .357 hanging between his left arm in a holster as he opened the rear door for his Don, before going around to the driver's side and sliding behind the wheel. Victor hoped he'd be part of a hit crew given the job of whacking the big N-word. He thought putting the key into the ignition and turning it. The concussive shockwave from the wad of C4 plastique explosives blew out all the windows of Steve's Steakhouse as the blast lifted the big sedan 3 feet into the air, peeling back its roof like a sardine can, blowing off 2 doors and cutting the car in half, leaving 2 bright flaming fireballs. The restaurant cleared in seconds as people poured out fearing a terrorist attack. A few stood bleeding with lacerations to their face and hands from the flying glass by the huge windows. No one paid any attention to the lowing of the champagne-colored Porsche or the 2 black men grinning inside as they rolled past the chaotic scene. Volume 1. Olivia had enough, she told herself, while holding an ice pack to her mother's temple where her father, Edward Carter, had struck her with a closed fist before turning his drunken fury onto Olivia and her 6 siblings. She'd grown used to the weekly beatings, but this one was the worst with her youngest sister, Colleen, suffering a broken arm, her little brother, David, a broken jaw, and herself with a blackened eye. Her mother, Willine, may have suffered the worst. One eye as red as a fire engine from a busted calipery, 2 teeth knocked out, and a suspected broken collarbone on top of the forced sexual intercourse her ill-tempered, alcoholic husband had inflicted on her. She sat shaking in shock and fear as Olivia pinned it to her. Olivia had never hated the man that was her father more than she had now as she tried soothing her mother with empty words of promises that no more will any of them be battered or hurt. She knew one promise that held merit, and that was that she would leave home to make something noteworthy of herself so that she could return and take her mother and siblings away from the 3-bedroom shack they reared in rural Alabama. Her father had once been a good man, a dependable man, till he lost his job at the local mill and took to drinking full-time. Now he worked as a ranch hand at a nearby horse ranch while he wasn't beating his family or passed out drunk on the torn and musty old living room sofa. Olivia knew she had to leave, and she would this day. She decided, deep in thought, if she stayed, she would kill the man that helped give her life, their life. So it was the night of November 19th, 1998, that a young, beautiful 17-year-old virgin and Alabama native would leave for school and not return for quite some time. The small Greyhound bus depot was really no more than a bus stop with a small service desk. Olivia saw as she paid for her ticket. "Where would you like a ticket to?" the elderly white ticket clerk asked, watching the girl being drop-dead gorgeous with her huge oval-shaped light green eyes, high cheekbones, full lips, and an hourglass figure looked to be no older than 14, the clerk mused. Olivia studied the map behind the clerk, taped to the wall, letting her eyes roam for several seconds before deciding on Seattle, Washington. "Seattle, please," she said with an uneasy smile. She hadn't even boarded the bus and she already was homesick. "That'll be $99 one way," the clerk said. $125 round trip." "One way," she sighed, handing over the money and realizing that she only had $61 to live on between here and Seattle, and she'd be facing a strange and alien environment with no prior experience. She took her ticket and wandered outside into the warm and humid sunshine. She removed the Twix candy bar that she had bought from the station's vending machine and slowly began eating it, hoping it would be enough to hold her hunger for the next 8 hours. 2 hours later, she boarded a bus for an adventure that would almost take her life. The sun set high in the powdery blue skies as Benjamin Creed rolled out of the large 4 posters and wandered out the bedroom balcony of his 2-bedroom condominium off Lake Washington. He eyed traffic moving along the 520 bridge, the sun glinting off the windshield. He awakened with 2 beautiful, voluptuous blondes in his bed. At the age of 56 years old, he was as sexually active as a man half his age and possessed a young energy. He now stood at the very apex of his life and its success. He owned a 48-foot yacht, 2 homes well over $1 million each, the condo he now stood in, as well as another in Miami's South Beach neighborhood. He had several expensive sports cars and luxury sedans, and he dated the most beautiful women in the world. He loved his life, he thought, as he returned to his bedroom to wake the 2 gorgeous Swedes. But he hadn't always thought, as growing up in a Chicago South Side during the 60s, crime, poverty, and homicide which had been the norm, and not many families had it as bad as the Creeds in a single-parent home. A mother who was a part-time prostitute, full-time heroin addict, a non-existent father. Robbery, drugs, rapes, and murders were an everyday thing in his young life. So by the age of 15, he was a hard-boiled criminal. It was how he survived after his older brother had his brains blew out and scattered all over Racine Avenue the year before. He'd become the man of the house, caring for his little sister and paying the rent. He entered the streets, eyes wide open and guns blazing. Money, Mac, and murder became his creed, and it remained until this very day. "Ben," one of the women called from the bath area, "would you like to join us?" "No," he grinned. "You two go on and I'll make us breakfast." He turned and headed for the kitchen. He made a few strategic moves lately that seemed to be paying off. Taking out Vincent Nicoletti had more than ruffled a few feathers, but it wasn't anything he actively worried about. He'd gotten the green light from Chicago, with whom he had been doing substantial business with over the years after being given the 24th ward on the south side once the neighborhood went black. He set about whipping up beef omelets, toast, raisin bagels, hash browns, and freshly squeezed OJ. The women joined him in a half an hour later and sat and enjoyed their meal over small talk and the latest word on the street. So Benjamin smiled. "What have you guys been hearing about me?" "That you're hung like a horse," the women giggled girlishly. "That's all?" he chuckled. "And at one point you ran the mob in Seattle," the younger of the two blondes answered casually. Ben simply nodded. An hour later he stood alone in a large condo studying his face in the bathroom mirror. His dark complexion, dark brown eyes, spreader nose, and low-cut fade. He cranked up his treadmill and began a 6-mile daily run while letting his mind roam free. By taking out Nicoletti, he put himself in bed with the Chicago outfit. But Mario Ferrario, the active boss of the Chicago mob, was soft and could be led in a bad direction. In any case, Mario won't be boss that long due to the unrest of the ranks. His captions were split in the backing of a Ferraro faction. Albert Belcastro would be a problem, should become boss, and his name was in the hat along with Michael Augustine and Paul Di Stefano. Michael would be a more favorable pick, Ben muled. Michael grew up with the blacks and loved black women almost as much as he did hip-hop. The young captain would bring an updated sense of leadership to the Chicago family instead of the outdated whims of old men. About 30 minutes later, Ben stepped from the treadmill, dripping and perspirated as he headed to the shower, turning it on cold. The freezing beads of water stole his breath for the first few seconds, and he began to lather himself. The day looked to be a beautiful one. He thought that maybe he could catch a show at the local cinema. Ben loved going to the movies at the cinema atmosphere. He had even had one built in his home. After 20 minutes, he stepped from the shower and padded nakedly for his bedroom, where he threw on a baby blue and white velour sweatsuit with matching Jordan tennis shoes, a large gold robe with a diamond-encrusted medallion, a heavy gold Rolex watch, a large diamond earrings, spraying on Gucci cologne while checking his image in the floor-to-ceiling mirror within his bedroom. He headed out to his garage and climbed behind the wheel of the '08 Burgundy Bentley before turning the ignition over and letting the luxury sedan idle as he dialed up his Prodigy. "Hello," a man answered. "Spud," Benjamin called, dropping the car in reverse and backing out into early morning sunshine traffic and lowering the convertible top. "Big Ben," the man said, sounding genuinely pleased to hear from the big man. "How've you been?" "Chillin', baby boy," Ben chuckled. "I figured we could go for a couple drinks and catch a new release." "I'm down with it." "I'll shoot through in about 30 minutes. "I'm at Rainier Beach," Spud said excitedly. "I've been hoopin', but come swoop a nigga up." "See you in 30, Ben smiled before hanging up. Spud Rico Graves was a bright kid, an exceptional athlete. He'd met Chance one afternoon a year before when Ben had come down to the Rainier Beach gym for a pickup game and almost got himself robbed at gunpoint by a light-skinned, red-headed young man he'd never seen before. The pudgy kid had materialized out of nowhere in a small school parking lot to a level 9mm Beretta in his own face, demanding his jewelry and wallet. Rocco had shot well together on the court. It was Rocco who had defused the situation, possibly saving Ben's life, but definitely saving the life of the robber. To show his appreciation, Ben had taken Rico out to lunch, where the two had talked and ate. Ben was surprised that not one Division I school had offered the kid a scholarship to play university. Ben found that the young man was not only one hell of a ball player, but smart as they come as well. Spud reminded him a lot of himself when he was that age. Ben quickly saw the possibilities and raw potential in the kid, and had secured the kid's tuition for the first 4 years of college from his own pocket. The kid could go all the way, Ben had thought, and if so, it represented a unique opportunity to Ben in the future. He turned the $18,000 car stereo up as he sped across the 520 to meet with his investment. Olivia had been in Seattle 3 months, living and hustling in the streets. She'd come close to being raped several times, shot at twice, beaten up once, and jailed 3 times for trespassing in some place or another. She could really be thankful that it was summer in Seattle, but you couldn't notice by all of the rain that fell over the city. She'd hustled up enough to pay for a hotel a week in advance, and she also saved a couple $100 from dealing small amounts of crack in Seattle's downtown area. She never really considered prostitution an option. She'd rather starve to death, but being above her average IQ, she quickly set her mind to the problem of homelessness and came up with an answer. She also became adept to pickpocketing, shortchanging, and short con.